For 18 years, I baked the birthday cakes, bandaged the scraped knees, and sat in the silent audience at school plays where she never invited me backstage. To my stepdaughter, Chloe, I was just Dad's wife, an unwanted fixture, a living reminder of a mother she lost. The day she turned 24, she handed me a suitcase and told me it was time I found my own life. What she didn't know, as I walked down the driveway with my head held high, was that the quiet, unassuming woman she was casting out held a secret that would unravel her entire world. This isn't just a story about family strife. It's about the invisible threads of legacy, the power we have before we even know it, and the stunning revelation that sometimes the person you dismiss holds the key to your entire future. Hello. Welcome to Hurt Stories. My dears, if you're listening to this, it's likely because you've seen the headlines, the frenzy, the utter chaos that has become of our family story. But before all of that, before the lawyers and the paparazzi and the shocking revelations, there was just a woman. A woman who loved a man and, by extension, hoped to love his daughter. I met Robert when I was 44, a widower with an 8-year-old girl whose grief was a fortress around her. Chloe. Even her name sounded like a fragile, closed bud. I understood. I, too, had known loss, though mine was of a different texture. I approached not as a replacement. One can never replace a sun. One can only hope to be a gentle moon, but as a steady presence. I baked. I organized. I listened to Robert's worries about his business, a modest but successful architectural firm he'd built from the ground up. I made sure the homework was done, that there was always clean laundry, that Christmases had magic, even if it was met with a sullen silence. It was a life built on small, deliberate stitches. I had my own quiet pursuits, of course. My charity work, which was deeply private, my long walks, my correspondence with a few old friends scattered across the globe. To Chloe, and I suppose to the outside world, these were just the harmless hobbies of a childless woman with too much time. A kept woman, as I once overheard her tell a friend on the phone during her teenage years. Dad keeps her comfortable, and she keeps the house clean. It's a transaction. Oh, how that stung. Because what I felt for Robert was the deep, abiding love of a second chance. A mature, grateful love. And for her, it was a desperate, unrequited hope. I saw the brilliant, fiery woman she could be, tangled in the thorns of her unresolved anger. I paid for her piano lessons she quit, her art classes she mocked, her university tuition which yielded a degree in business she then used primarily to critique her father's company. Robert, bless him, was so guilt-ridden over her mother's passing, he could never set a boundary. He was the soft touch, the endless checkbook. I became the unofficial keeper of limits, the voice of reason, and thus the villain. The tension was a low hum in our beautiful house, a house Robert designed. It was all glass and light in sharp angles, a stunning place that never truly felt like a home because one of its 3 inhabitants refused to allow it. I'd find her studying me sometimes, with a cold, appraising look, as if trying to decipher what my angle was. She was convinced I was after something. Security, money, status. The irony of that would later be so profound it takes my breath away. The breaking point, as they so often are, was about money. Robert's firm hit a turbulent patch. A major project fell through. A liability lawsuit loomed. He was stressed, older, his health not what it was. I suggested, gently, that perhaps Chloe, now 2 years out of university and drawing a generous salary from the family business, might move into her own apartment. That the financial burden of maintaining her lavish lifestyle, the convertible, the designer wardrobe, the endless socializing, could be eased. Robert reluctantly agreed. We presented it as a natural step into full independence. She took it as a declaration of war. The look she gave me was pure, unadulterated venom. You, she hissed, have been waiting for this, to get me out, to have him and everything to yourself. Robert tried to intervene, but she was a storm. She blamed my influence, my whispering, my petty jealousy. A week of silence followed. Then, the day after her 24th birthday, a dinner I had prepared, a cake she barely touched, she came to me in my sunroom, my sanctuary. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, all cold conviction. "Eleanor," she said, my name always a weapon on her tongue. "I think it's time. Dad never going to say it, but this isn't working. You need to go. We'll be fine. Better, actually. It's time you found your own life." The "we" was the cruelest cut. She spoke for her father, a man who was upstairs, asleep, exhausted by worry. I didn't fight. Arguing would have validated her narrative of me as a clinging, desperate figure. So I did something that shocked her. I smiled. A small, sad, but knowing smile. "All right, Chloe," I said, my voice steady. "If that's what you believe is best." I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She expected tears, pleading. She did not expect serene acceptance. I packed a single suitcase, just my personal effects, some books, my jewelry box, a few photographs. I did not wake Robert. I left a note on his bedside table. "My love, don't worry. This is a temporary storm. I'll be in touch soon. Trust me. Always, E." As I wheeled my suitcase down the sleek, polished concrete driveway in the early morning light, I didn't look back at the glass house. I looked forward. For the first time in 18 years, I was not Eleanor, the stepmother. I was simply Eleanor, and Eleanor had work to do. I checked into a modest but elegant hotel in the city. My first call was not to a lawyer, but to my financial advisor, followed by a call to a discreet private security firm. Then I waited. The explosion came within hours. Robert called, frantic, horrified. He'd thrown Chloe out, he said. He was coming to get me. I told him to stay, to wait. "The truth needs space to breathe, Robert," I told him. "Let her sit with her victory for a moment." Chloe, meanwhile, was triumphant. She posted a vague but cutting message on social media about removing toxic influences and starting a fresh chapter. She moved my things into storage, changed the codes on the house security, and installed herself as the lady of the manor, ready to help her father run the company out of its funk. She had no idea the funk was a canyon, and she was standing on the edge. Robert's firm, Winthrop Architects, was weeks from insolvency. The lawsuit was a multi-million-dollar threat. The bank was calling in lines of credit. This was the reality I had been shielding him from, managing through my own quiet channels. Chloe, with her newfound authority, demanded to see the books to take control. The firm's long-serving CFO, a man loyal to Robert, and though she didn't know it to me, finally laid it bare. The company was drowning. Panicked, she went to the bank with Robert, trying to renegotiate. The bank manager, polite but firm, informed them their collateral was insufficient, their liquidity non-existent. In a moment of breathtaking arrogance, Chloe scoffed. "What about the other assets? The investment portfolio? The Swiss holdings?" The bank manager looked confused. "Ms. Winthrop, your father's assets are tied to the firm. There are no separate Swiss holdings." "Of course there are," she insisted, turning to Robert. "Dad, tell him. The ones Eleanor was always secretly managing. The numbered accounts." Robert looked utterly lost. "Chloe, what on earth are you talking about? Eleanor doesn't manage our money. We have a financial advisor." "Not our money, Dad. Hers. The money she's been siphoning off. She's got to have her own stash somewhere. Why else would she leave so quietly?" This was the narrative she'd constructed. I was a gold digger who had finally been discovered and cut off, fleeing with my ill-gotten gains. The bank manager, now uncomfortable, suggested perhaps a forensic accountant. It was then that Robert, pushed to his limit, did something he should have done years ago. He looked at his daughter, not with guilt, but with a stern clarity. "Eleanor did not take a penny from us, Chloe. She only ever gave, and you threw her out of her own home." but Chloe was a detective on a mission. Convinced she was uncovering my crime, she hired a private investigator. She gave him my name, my photograph, the scant details she knew. Eleanor Vance, former charity volunteer, no known family, married my father Robert Winthrop in 2005. She expected him to find secret accounts, hidden properties, a life of luxury I was living off their funds. What the investigator found was a void. A strangely clean, impenetrable void. My digital footprint was minimal. My history before Robert was sparse. It was as if Eleanor Vance had politely appeared at age 44. The investigator, a good man whose firm was, unbeknownst to Chloe, retained by me for security, called her with his preliminary report. "There's nothing here, Ms. Winthrop. It's almost professionally curated. Who is your stepmother?" This only fueled her fire. "A professional con artist," she declared. She began digging through the storage unit, through my boxes of personal items. She was looking for bank statements, passports, clues. What she found was a small, locked, and rather beautiful antique wooden box, tucked inside my old sewing kit. She pried it open. Inside, there were no bank details. There were photographs. A much younger me, standing with people whose faces she vaguely recognized from newspapers and business magazines. There was a faded picture of me with a dignified older man on a sailing yacht, a man who was unmistakably the late billionaire shipping magnate, Alfred Ross. There was a delicate antique key on a ribbon, and at the bottom, a single cream-colored business card. It was engraved, not printed. It read, "Eleanor Ross, Chairman, the Rosethorn Group, a private equity and holding company." There was a telephone number, nothing else. Chloe told the story later, her voice shaking. She said she'd sat on the floor of the storage unit, the dust motes dancing in the slatted light, holding that card, her mind refusing to make sense of it. Ross. Rosethorn, Eleanor Ross. She Googled Rosethorn Group. The results were sparse, authoritative. A financial news article from a decade ago about it acquiring a controlling stake in a major tech firm. A philanthropic listing showing it as the primary funder for the very cancer research charity I had volunteered for. A society page snippet, decades old, mentioning the marriage of Alfred Ross's only daughter, Eleanor, to a rising diplomat. The pieces, jagged and impossible, began to click. The quiet charity work, the global correspondence, the unflappable calm, the way I never worried about money, not because I was spending Robert, but because the concept was irrelevant. The investigator's report of a professionally curated past. He wasn't finding a criminal's cover-up. He was finding the protective veil of extreme private wealth. She drove back to the glass house, the card burning a hole in her pocket. Robert was in his study, staring at bankruptcy papers. She threw the card on his desk. "Who is she, Dad?" Her voice was a whisper. Robert picked it up. He stared at it for a full minute, his face pale. He knew the name Ross, of course. Every businessman did. He looked from the card to his daughter's stricken face, and a strange, weary understanding dawned on him, not of my wealth, but of my secrecy. "She's the woman I love," he said simply. "And it seems she's also a woman who valued our normal life more than her extraordinary one." Chloe's next move was one of pure, desperate audacity. She called the number on the card. A polite, efficient voice answered. "Office of Ms. Ross." "I need to speak to Eleanor Ross," Chloe demanded, trying to sound authoritative. "May I ask who is calling?" "This is Chloe Winthrop, her stepdaughter." There was a pause, a soft click. "Please hold, Ms. Winthrop." The line was silent for what felt like an eternity. Then, a warm, familiar voice came on, my voice, but with a timbre she'd never heard before, a tone of effortless, unassailable authority. "Hello, Chloe." The box, the card. "Rosethorn," she stammered. "Yes," I said calmly. "I've been expecting your call." "Who are you?" The question was a plea. I am still the woman who packed your school lunches, Chloe, I said. But I am also Alina Ross, only child and sole heir of Alfred Ross. The Rosethorn Group is my family's enterprise. It manages assets, investments, and philanthropic endeavors globally. I have run it since my father's passing 25 years ago. The silence on her end was absolute. I could almost hear her world cracking apart. Why, she finally breathed. Why the secret? Why pretend to be that? I wasn't pretending, I said, a sharpness entering my voice for the first time. I was that. Alina Vance was the name I used after my first husband, the diplomat, passed. I wanted a life untainted by fortune hunters, by sycophants, by the relentless glare of that kind of wealth. I wanted a simple human life. I found it with your father. I was his wife. I was your stepmother. Those weren't roles. They were my choices, my truth. You mistook my contentment for emptiness, and my silence for having nothing to say. But the money, our money, the firm, she choked out. Your father's firm has been client of Rosethorn's distressed asset division for the past 6 months, I said matter-of-factly. The lawsuit was settled last Tuesday. The bank debt has been restructured. The major project has a new, better-funded partner. The company is secure. I had been saving his life's work, not from the sidelines as his wife, but from the helm as a powerhouse, all while she accused me of looting it. You could have just told us. You could have helped. And become the wallet, the deus ex machina. No, Chloe, your father's pride, his own agency, mattered. I was helping in the ways I could as his partner. My plan was always to stabilize it, then gift him the restructured company, free and clear for our anniversary. You accelerated the timeline. And as for telling you, would it have made a difference? Or would you have simply seen a bigger, more tempting target for your resentment? She had no answer. What happens now? She whispered. Now, I said, you live with the truth. You look at the woman you dismissed as a nobody and understand she was someone who chose you, chose your father, chose a life of ordinary love over one of isolated grandeur. You reflect on the fact that you evicted one of the wealthiest, most privately influential women in the country from her home because you assumed she was a parasite. And you decide what kind of person you want to be from here. I ended the call. The next few days were a whirlwind. Robert came to see me. There were tears, not of anger, but of stunned awe. You saved everything, he said. I protected our life, I corrected him, taking his hand. I always will. The story, of course, did not stay private. Chloe, in her shock, confessed to a friend who told a friend. A financial journalist pieced it together. Cinderella in reverse. Billionaire heiress EVICTED by stepdaughter screamed the headlines. The world was captivated by the irony, the sheer Shakespearean twist of it all. The fallout was brutal for Chloe. She became a global meme, the avatar of entitlement and catastrophic misjudgment. Old friends came forward with stories of her casual cruelty toward me. The media camped outside the glass house. Her fresh chapter was a front-page scandal. I did not gloat. I made a single, brief public statement. My family is navigating a private matter. I love my husband, Robert, deeply. My relationship with my stepdaughter is complex and, at this time, painful. I ask for privacy and compassion as we work through this. Then I acted. I purchased a stunning, historic estate on the outskirts of the city, not as a show of wealth, but as a sanctuary with walls that could hold a new beginning. Robert moved in with me. The glass house was sold, the proceeds placed in a trust for Chloe. I did not cut her off financially. That would have been petty and cruel. But the automatic flow of funds from Robert ended. For the first time in her life, she had to budget, to work, to truly face the world. She attempted to reach out, of course. Letters, emails, texts, full of apologies that slowly morphed from defensive justifications to raw, shattered remorse. I did not reply for a long time. Forgiveness is not a switch. It's a garden that must be replanted in salted earth. The turning point came nearly a year later. Robert had a minor health scare. Chloe came to the hospital, hesitantly, expecting to be turned away. I was in the waiting room. She looked older, thinner, stripped of her arrogant gloss. She didn't speak. She just handed me a manila folder. Inside was a business plan. Not for a grandiose venture, but for a small, nonprofit arts outreach program for underprivileged children. It was thoughtful, well-researched, humble. And clipped to the front was a check, repaying, in small installments she'd saved from her new job, the amount of the last allowance her father had given her before the split. "I'm not doing this to get anything," she said, her eyes on the floor. "I'm doing it because I finally looked at the world without assuming it owed me. And I remembered the piano lessons, the art classes. You always tried to give me that. A way to create, not just consume. I didn't see it then." I looked at the plan, at the check. It wasn't the money. It was the symbol. It was the first genuine, unselfish thing I had ever seen her produce. "Sit down, Chloe," I said. We talked for an hour, not as stepmother and stepdaughter, but as two women who had been through a cataclysm. I didn't offer to fund her project, but I did offer to introduce her to the director of my foundation, who could guide her through grant applications. A hand up, not a handout. That was the new beginning. It is fragile. It is daily work. The trust between us is a delicate seedling, but it is growing. So, my dears, that is my story. The story of a woman who was kicked out and discovered. But the true discovery wasn't Chloe's, it was mine. I discovered that love, real love, is not diminished by secrets meant to protect it. It is tested, and in the testing, its alloy is revealed. I discovered that sometimes the greatest power lies in appearing to have none, because it filters the world, showing you who values your heart over your utility. And I learned this most profound lesson. Identity is not a single card you present to the world. It is a layered, complex tapestry. I am Alina Ross, the heiress, the chairwoman, the force in a boardroom. I am Alina Vance, the woman who found love in middle age. I am Alina, Robert's wife, his anchor and his joy. And I am still Alina, the stepmother who bandaged the knees and baked the cakes, whose love was rejected but never rescinded. Chloe asked me once, after the reconciliation began, if I regretted not telling them. "The truth always comes out," she said. I told her, yes, it does, but it comes out on its own terms and in its own time. If I had led with my wealth, we would never have had the love. Your father might have loved the idea of me or been intimidated by me. You would have resented me for an entirely different, perhaps more valid, reason. We had 18 years of something real, something uncommodified. That was worth the secret. And the subsequent storm was the price of admission for that authenticity. To anyone listening who feels unseen, undervalued, or quietly judged, remember that your worth is not declared by the volume of your voice or the visibility of your assets. Your strength may reside in your stillness. Your power may be in your patience. You may be a quiet legend in a story no one has yet read the cover of. And to those who are quick to judge, to dismiss, to assume they know the full measure of a person, be cautious. The unassuming woman baking cookies in the kitchen might just hold the deeds to the world, and she might just be choosing, every single day, to be there with you, not because she has to, but because she wants to. That is the most powerful kind of love there is. Treat it gently. You may never know what you have, until you've tried to throw it away. Thanks for listening. If you want to hear more story like this, please like the video and subscribe the channel. Hit the bell icon to get notified.